After a huge road win at Clemson on Saturday, the North Carolina Tar Heels are on a 4-game winning streak, and the reason for that sustained success is not what you would guess.
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, it's Monday, January 8th, 2024. Welcome into the Locked On Tar Heels podcast, the only daily North Carolina show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Shade, and I want to thank in particular you everydayers for joining us to get your Tar Heels content every day. This episode is brought to you by Jace Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jace case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat 50+ infections. Get yours today at jacemedical.com. Hey, so glad to have you all as part of this community. If you'd like to be a bigger part of it, maybe you're new to the show, in which case, welcome. So glad that you're here. Come join the Locked On Tar Heels Discord. It's a place where we're having Carolina conversations all the time. It's a great place. It's a safe place. Would love to have you there. The link for that is in the show notes. Hey, coming up on the show today, obviously, we're talking in big part about Carolina's 65-55 win over Clemson at Little John Coliseum on Saturday. Hey, and it was a big weekend of wins for our Locked On Tar Heels family. Coach Pat Kilby's Carl Albert High School team won their tournament this weekend over some of the best other schools in Oklahoma. Coach Rob's Milligan University team won a true road game in overtime by 1, a game they never led by more than 1. I think he said they were down like 6 in overtime and still won. So it's a party for the Locked On Tar Heels family this weekend. You'll love to see it. By the way, if you didn't check out Saturday's live post-game reaction, go back and watch that on YouTube. We didn't send it out to the audio feed, so if you're listening, you're just getting this coming off of it. But coming up on the show today, we are going to have our Four Corners recap. We'll have our shady stat of the game. We're going to talk about the state of the ACC. We're 3 games in now, and so I want to kind of let you know where things are at. Carolina women got another win over a ranked team on Sunday, and I'm going to give you my pick for the national championship football game coming up tonight. But let's first get into what I was talking about in the cold open. I said Carolina's on a 4-game winning streak now, and the reason for that, or at least the chief reason for that, is probably not what you would have guessed it would be. And that is what we're talking about first, which is the North Carolina defense. We know that the offense has all these pieces that can do all these things, a lot of complementary parts, shooting, interior, passing, whatever it is, they've got it. But right now, what's happening is because of the defense. Let me give you a little bit of where things are at overall right now. The Tar Heels are 11-3 overall, 3-0 in the ACC. They're currently, as I record this, 8th at Ken Palm. That's changing all the time as games go final. Right now, they are 9th in the net, 4-3 in quad 1. So they do have those 4 quad 1 wins. Obviously, I'm recording this before the new AP poll comes out, but Marquette lost on Saturday. So the Tar Heels are going to be probably 7th in the country in the AP poll. And for me, based on everything we're seeing, the Tar Heels are the best team in the ACC. And why? It's this defense that we're going to talk about. The last 4 games, this 4-game winning streak the Tar Heels are on. So that goes back to Oklahoma, Charleston Southern, and then these 2 ACC road games. Carolina's played Pitt, and then on Saturday at Clemson. In those games, let me just give you a couple quick stats to begin showing what I'm talking about, why the defense is doing work. They have held all 4 of those opponents under 70 points, 69, 60, 57, and 55. That's an average in this 4-game span of allowing just 60 points, 60.3 points. And in total this season, Carolina has held 9 of their 14 opponents under 70. That's bonkers. You think if Carolina is going to hold people under 70, how often are they going to be dropping 70, right? So it's like, oh, we just got to get to 75 and we're good? Game over. Let's go Tar Heels, right? Here's another part of why the defense is playing so well. Back-to-back games now of holding down the opponent's leading score. In fact, about 10 points under their average. Tuesday at Pitt, Blake Hinson came in, or actually currently is averaging 19.1 points. I think it was slightly over 20 at game time. He scored just 11 against the Tar Heels on 4 of 16 shooting, 2 of 11 from 3. And then Saturday, PJ Hall and Joe Girard, the top 2 scorers for Clemson. PJ Hall came in 20.2 points a game. He scored 10. He fouled out, shot 4 of 13 from the field and 0 of 5 from 3. Joe Girard came in averaging 15.8 points per game. He scored 5, shot 1 of 10 from the field and 0 of 4 from 3. That's phenomenal stuff that the Tar Heels are doing. So it's not like they're getting some buckets. Sure, like Blake Hinson got to double digits. PJ Hall got to double digits. But they needed more shot. Like they took more shots than points scored. You will take that every single day of the week. And think about it this way in terms of holding these guys under their average. I often talked about this with Leaky Black. Like maybe, he's not averaging 15 points a game, but if he's able to hold his primary defensive mark 10 points under his average, that's just as good as a net positive as scoring 10 points above Leaky's average. Does that make sense? So Carolina benefits massively by holding these leading scorers well under their season average. I love it. You love to see it. This is incredible. That's a 10-point net positive. What about the KenPom numbers? Well, I said Carolina is 8th currently overall. They're 11th in offensive efficiency, but more impressively, they're all the way up to currently, as I record this, 16th in defensive efficiency. The last time they were that high on defense, the 2018-19 season, they finished 15th in the nation. So it's been a minute since the defense has been operating at this level. So here's where this is at for me defensively. Carolina is going to score more often than not, right? Like they've just played 2 strong defensive teams. But I'm at the point now where I'm like, hey, look, let's make defense an identity. Lean into it. Say the 23-24 Tar Heels are a defensive team that you have to worry about when you go play them. And then, oh, by the way, if Carolina can really lean into that and just keep shutting opponents down as a team and as individual defenders, imagine what happens at games when Carolina is clicking offensively. Watch out. It's going to get dirty and ugly. And I love it. And I'm sure you do too. Now, here's the other thing about the defense. Let's look at the closing stretch of the Clemson game, because this is a great example of why this defense has been so good. If you watch this game, if you're following along, you know how tight and back and forth it was. I never felt comfortable in this game the entire time. Even when Carolina had a lead, I was like, man, I don't know. Carolina wasn't hitting a ton of shots. I think they hit 10 total field goals in the second half, 5 of which were threes. But then this closing stretch is what really, really impressed me. So PJ Hall hits a little jumper with 5:02 left on the clock. Carolina had a 5-point lead at that point. That cuts it to 3. Tar Heels are winning 58-55. Now, if you remember the final score, it was 65-55. That means that from the moment PJ Hall hit that shot with 5:02 remaining, for the final 5 minutes and 1 second, the Clemson Tigers did not score another point in this basketball game. And I don't just mean like, they hit a couple free throws, but they didn't make any more field goals. 0 points, goose egg, zilch, not a nothing. That's what we're talking about here. Carolina goes on a 7-0 decisive run to end things. In that final 5 minutes, Clemson was 0 of 6 from the field, 0 of 2 from the free throw line, just 3 rebounds, and Carolina was finally able to hold them to just 1 offensive rebound in that closing stretch. If you remember the beginning of the second half when Ian Shefflin was seemingly grabbing every offensive rebound under the sun, that is a big change. Meanwhile, in that same stretch, the Tar Heels go 2 of 4 from the field, 3 of 4 from the free throw line, and grab 8 rebounds, 2 of which were offensive. That's what needs to happen. I love to see it. Now, you'd love to have a dynamic, dominant stretch earlier in the game, but you'll take it anywhere you can get it, particularly on the road, particularly in ACC play. Now, something you might or might not have noticed as part of that closing stretch, From 7:11 left on the clock to 3:52, the lineup was Elliot, Cadeau, Seth Trimble, RJ Davis, Harrison Ingram, and Armando Bacot. But then from that final 3:52 on, it was the five starters minus Elliot, Cadeau, and plus Seth Trimble. Not that Seth came in. He was already on the floor. It's that Cormac Ryan came back in and Elliot Cadeau went out. In that final 3:52, there was a 5-0 score, and Carolina had a 7-1 rebounding advantage. Now, here's why I bring that up. It's not in any way to bash Elliot and to say, oh, Elliot Cadeau is on the bench. And I know that's going to be the narrative a lot of people bring up when they look at this closing lineup to say, oh, Elliot didn't have a great game, so he's on the bench, or coach doesn't trust Elliot so he's on the bench. That ain't it at all. I bring this up instead to praise Seth Trimble. I flipped this of we are not bashing Elliot. Instead, we're saying, look at the confidence that Seth has and look at the confidence that the coaching staff has in Seth to leave him in there, because he not only played the closing stretch, check this out. Seth Trimble played the final 13 minutes and 54 seconds of this game. That's right. For the final essentially 14 minutes, Seth Trimble never left the floor. And in that stretch, he had Carolina's second best plus minus behind only Armando Bacot. Seth Trimble, yes, is doing work, and it is critically important for the success of these Tar Heels, both offensively and defensively. Now, Hubert Davis has been demanding that the Tar Heels rebound more capably than they did for a stretch. And guess what? They have been. What's led to it? I got that answer for you, and the rest of the Four Corners preview, plus the shady stat of the game, all coming up in just a second. Right after I tell you that this episode of Locked On Tar Heels is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL regular season just wrapped on Sunday, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. It's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. How great is that to hear? Their app is really easy to use, and there's a bunch of different ways to bet. Same game parlays. There's a new Explore tab to help you find bets. They got obviously all the Carolina stuff, all great basketball, but tonight's the national championship game, so I got to give you that line. Michigan favored by 5.5. If you believe in Washington, man, go put some money on that. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, we're right back together. For those of you watching on YouTube, you can see that I've now put up the box score from this game. As we get into our Four Corners recap, we're more often talking nitty-gritty statistical stuff. So I want you to be able to look at the box score as we're cruising along. For those of you listening, you can pull it up on your phone or just listen, or come back and watch it on YouTube later. Number one in our Four Corners recap, rebounding. Here's the deal. I said it, but Hubert Davis has been making a big deal about rebounding with his team because they weren't rebounding well. Let me just take you through how the season has gone. In the first 8 games, Carolina won the rebounding battle in every game, except, interestingly enough, the UC Riverside game, where Carolina lost that rebounding battle by 1. But then, and here's where Coach Davis was like, nah, this ain't cutting it. Games 9, 10, and 11, where Carolina played UConn, Kentucky, and Oklahoma. You know that Carolina went 1-2 in that stretch, beating only Oklahoma. Here was the issue. Against UConn, Carolina -10 on the boards. Against Kentucky, -10 on the boards. And against Oklahoma, despite the win, -7 on the boards. So at that point, it's like, no, things must change on the glass. And change on the glass they have. Since then, Carolina's played Charleston Southern, Pitt, and Clemson. Now, against Charleston Southern, obviously you expect Carolina to out-rebound them, but you would against UC Riverside too. But against Charleston Southern, they did it. Out-rebounding those guys by 21. Wow. Now, while that's expected, going on the road in ACC play might not be as much expected, but that's where Carolina went and made hay, out-rebounding Pittsburgh by 10 and out-rebounding Clemson by 11. How is that happening? What's the turnaround? It's gang rebounding. It's not just standing around waiting on Armando to go get a rebound. It's everybody joining in on it. Let me tell you about Clemson and Pitt and Charleston Southern. Against Clemson, 9 of the 10 players that played grabbed at least 1 rebound, and 8 of the 10 had multiple rebounds. And while Bacot obviously did his part in a big way, 16 boards, Jae'lyn Wither, 6 rebounds, 4 each from Harrison Ingram, RJ Davis, and Seth Trimble. That's what you got to see. Same stuff against Pitt. 7 of the 9 players that played had multiple boards, and 4 players had at least 6. Charleston Southern, all 14 players on the roster played. 12 of them grabbed a rebound, and that was everybody that played 2 or more minutes. And oh, by the way, it's not like Pitt and Clemson are some also-rans in rebounding. Pitt is number 1 in the ACC in rebounds per game. Clemson's number 5 in the ACC in rebounds per game. So you got to think, if you out-rebound both of those guys by double digits, you have 0 excuses to get out-rebounded by anybody in the ACC. But I love to see it. Rebounding being a success. Point number 1 in the Four Corners recap. Number 2, we're looking at bench usage and offensive balance, kind of everyone chipping in mentality. The bench usage in this Clemson game was 26.5%. And I know that doesn't seem like a big number, but outside of the Charleston Southern game where everyone's getting in and you're getting a ton of minutes, of course, it's the worst team you've played all season. But outside of that game, this was the highest percentage of bench minutes played since the Arkansas game that was the last game of Battle for Atlantis. Here's why that's really encouraging to me. That means that against a road game, against another, what we believe is a top 3 ACC opponent, someone that's going to vie for the ACC regular season championship, Coach Davis trusted his bench in a big way. Now, it's not massive. It's not like he's using them, 40% of the time, but still, it is the highest we've seen since that Arkansas game, and that's encouraging. Now, another part of this is the offensive balance that comes along with this. For the past 2 games, Carolina has not had a 20-point score. That's one of the things I keep up with in my post-game stats looking is how many 20-point scores were there? There were none against Pitt and none against Clemson. And while you like to see those kind of performances, when you don't have anyone scoring 20 points, sometimes it can be a sign of offensive balance. For example, in this Clemson game, literally everyone that stepped foot on the court for the Tar Heels, all 5 starters, all 5 bench players, scored at least, 2 points, whatever. And perhaps 2 of the biggest shots of the game came from 2 of these bench players. The Woj bomb, Paxson Wojcik came in, hit a 3, and then Seth Trimble hit a 3 on the very next possession. And it wasn't some meaningless throwaway moment of the game. Clemson had just tied it. Then Wojcik hits, Chase Hunter got a layup for Clemson, and then Trimble hits, getting that lead back to 4. And what's important about that is never again after the Seth Trimble 3 was this game tied or did Clemson lead. Carolina never trailed and was never tied the rest of the game after that moment. Or how about another 3-pointer as we're talking about offensive balance? Clemson, as you probably recall, came in shooting very well from 3. That's something we talked about. Carolina had to stop them on. Tigers go 1 of 18 from 3. But that 1 3 they hit felt like a massive moment because it's like, oh man, the lid might come off now and then Carolina might be in trouble. But here's what happened. Immediately after Clemson hit that 1 3, you know what happened for the Tar Heels? Harrison Ingram answers with his own 3 to get the 1-point lead back for the Tar Heels. That one, I know we're all talking about the Paxson Wojcik and Seth Trimble 3s because of how big those were, but don't miss that Harrison Ingram 3, answering Clemson's lone 3 of the game. Critically important. Another part of this offensive balance is finally the season assist percentage is back up over 50%. That's just where we're looking at how many field goals include assists that lead to those field goals. In this specific game, Carolina assisted on 14 of their 25 baskets. That was 56%. And 4 different Tar Heels had 3 or more assists in this game. So it's not just like it was RJ or Elliot or something. It's everybody sharing the ball well. You'll love to see it. Number 3 in our Four Corners recap. This is the Armando Bacot that the Tar Heels need every single game. 14 points, 16 boards, 6 of 11 on field goals. That's back-to-back games with double-digit field goal attempts. That should be happening every single game. It's not like he's got to lead the team, but Armando needs to be in that 10 to 15 field goals range. He also had 3 assists, just 1 turnover, 2 blocks. He was incredibly engaged. He was incredibly aggressive. He was demanding the ball. And he has to be that way, but also his teammates have to get it to him, right? Like for a post player, it's not like he's bringing the ball up and he's going to get his own offense. He relies on RJ and Elliot and Seth and everyone else to get him the ball in the right place at the right time. And that's got to keep happening. I also love defensively. He took a big challenge, a personal challenge to slow down PJ Hall. And we already talked about how well that went. Oh, and by the way, 75th double-double of his career, moved into 5th on the all-time scoring list for Carolina, passing Charlie Scott and Al Wood. How about this? Next up on the list is Lenny Rosenbluth in 4th place all-time. Armando was just 30 points behind that Carolina legend. And oh, by the way, one of the biggest sequences of the game, there's just over 4 minutes left on the clock. So it's in that closing 5-minute sequence that we talked about earlier. Clemson gets an offensive rebound. Hello, Ian Schifflin. Again, like seriously, what a phenomenal game that dude had. I know we held Joe Girard and PJ Hall down well, but Ian Schifflin did a little bit of everything. Was really impressed with his motor. So he gets this offensive rebound. He's going back up for a layup. Bacot gets one of his 2 blocks. And then on the other end of the court, throws a beautiful pass to RJ for a layup. So Clemson had the ball there with a chance that layup would have cut it to 1, a 3 would have tied it. But instead, Carolina goes and gets a layup on the other end. And so instead of a tied game or a 1-point lead for the Tar Heels, they're back up 5. That was a critical sequence, and Armando was instrumental in it. Number 4 on the 4 corners recap, free throws. We all know how critically important free throws are to Carolina's offensive arsenal, both getting to the line a lot and converting at the line a lot. And I talked about coming into this game how important that was going to be. Well, guess what? It did not happen. Carolina had their fewest attempts of the season, 12. In fact, that was just the second time all season they've been under 20 free throw attempts. It was also their fewest makes of the season, which you would expect. They made 7, but here's how different that was. Their previous low in makes was 12. Carolina was almost half shy of that. For the season, Carolina gets 23% of their points from the free throw line. They got just 10.8% in this game. But hear me not saying that as a negative. I'm saying that despite Carolina's reliance on free throws, they were still able to figure out a way to make this game a W. That's so important. All right, shady stat of the game. Let's wrap up this section before we keep moving on. Carolina now has 4 wins over AP ranked opponents this season, and they've only played 14 games. In the regular season of Coach Davis's first year, Carolina had 2 wins over AP ranked teams. Last year, Coach Davis's second season, in the regular season, Carolina had just 2 wins over AP ranked teams. What does that mean? Carolina has as many wins over AP ranked teams in the first 14 games of this regular season as they did in the first 2 regular seasons of Coach Davis's career combined. That's not me bashing on those 2 years. That's me saying, look at what the Tar Heels are doing right now. Coach Davis is getting this team going. Can we please laugh at everyone who put Coach Davis on the hot seat preseason? That was ludicrous and silly, and hopefully everyone's coming around now. You love to see it. Speaking of those 4 wins over ranked teams, plus starting 3-0 in the ACC, Carolina has put themselves in great position in conference play. What's the rest of the conference doing? I'll answer that question in just a second, right after I tell you that this episode of Locked on Tar Heels is brought to you by Jace Medical. I know we come to sports to escape from a lot of the crazy realities of life, but let's just talk for a minute about what happens when you need to prepare for the life realities that happen. According to the FDA, pharmacies are running out of antibiotics like amoxicillin right in the middle of the worst flu season in over a decade. Can't imagine a more helpless feeling than if someone I loved or cared about was getting sick while a supply chain issue kept them from the life-saving medication they needed. Thankfully, there's Jace Medical. Their Jace case is a pack of 5 different antibiotics to treat a long list of bacterial illnesses, including things like UTIs and skin infections, among others. This could happen to any one of us. So visit jacemedical.com and complete your physician encounter. It will be reviewed by a board-certified physician, and your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. It's never been more important to be prepared than today. Go to jacemedical.com and use offer code LOCKEDON to get $20 off your order. All right, we got a couple odds and ends that I want to hit on, but first I want to start by looking at what's happening in the rest of the ACC and what kind of position the Tar Heels have put themselves in early in conference play. As I've said a couple times, the Tar Heels are currently 3-0. Remember, they had that early December win over Florida State, that great comeback, and now these wins over Pitt and Clemson. Last time the Tar Heels were 3-0 in ACC play, the 2015-16 season. Yeah, it's been a minute. That's like 8 seasons ago. And that season, they had actually an 8-0 start in ACC play. So that's the kind of road you're on right now. That's what we're talking about as a possibility, but you got to keep taking it one game at a time. Who else is up there at the top with the Tar Heels? Great question. Interestingly enough, NC State is also 3-0. They blitzed Virginia 76-60 on Saturday. By the way, the Cavaliers have lost 4 games, and all of them have been by at least 16 points. That was the lowest margin. The others are like 22, 23, and 24. But NC State's weird because right before that, they almost lost at Notre Dame and should have if Notre Dame hadn't kind of, just messed up at the end. Here's the other team that's at the top with North Carolina right now is Wake Forest, who beat Miami on Saturday, 86-82. So the Tar Heels, the Wolfpack, and the Demon Deacons are all tied at 3-0. It's great for the state of North Carolina. You love to see it. But now it's time for the Tar Heels to rise up. Also, by the way, that clearly makes this game in Raleigh massive on Wednesday. Who knows? We're 3 games into a 20-game schedule, so early, but just like this Clemson win was a great thing early in the season, if NC State's going to be a contender, you want to get this win right now on Wednesday. So obviously we'll be looking for that. As for other teams that we expect to be players in the ACC in terms of regular season success, Virginia has 2 ACC losses, that one on Saturday and a previous one. And then Clemson now has 2 ACC losses. Miami earlier last week in the Tar Heels. Duke and Miami both have a loss. Miami obviously just lost. Duke lost earlier in the season to Georgia Tech. I said earlier in the show that the Tar Heels are the best team in the ACC right now. And I mean that in terms of best team, but I might not mean it in terms of clear ACC frontrunners. And here's why. It's a scheduling issue. The Tar Heels only play Louisville once. They only play Notre Dame once. Meanwhile, Duke gets to play both of those teams twice, for example. So there's some of those scheduling quirks in a non-true round robin that you just got to put up with. But sometimes there's stuff that crops up that you didn't realize might be helpful. For example, Wake Forest is playing so well. The Tar Heels only play them once, and it's in the Dean Dome. So that's great news, right? So, I get on paper, whatever, but you just got to go out and keep stacking wins one game at a time. You just never know what's going to happen. At the same time, while I know it's only been 3 games, I cannot stress enough how important that win over Clemson was on Saturday. That's going to pay dividends all season long. Let's just keep taking care of business. 2 random things also back from the Clemson game. Extremely classy move from the Tigers, similar to how Carolina left Eric Montross's spot empty in that home game against Charleston Southern. Clemson had a nice little placard at his spot on Saturday, along with some flowers, and the placard just read, "In loving memory, Eric Montross, father, husband, son, Tar Heel." Love to see it. Don't expect, opponents to do that, but it just goes to show neat stuff there. One other random thing from this game. Thank goodness Cormac Ryan was okay for the second time this season. Tweaked his ankle. This was late in the first half. Obviously, in the Villanova game, he was done and couldn't play. But thankfully, this time around, was able to come right back in even before halftime. And so a lot of times late half moments like that, they just go straight to the locker room. So that's encouraging. Hopefully he will be okay. I think it means he needs to stop hanging out with Joel Berry, right? Got to take care of these ankles. Women on Sunday go to South Bend, Indiana, and win at Notre Dame 61-57. The women Tar Heels are 3-0 themselves in ACC play. In fact, they have 2 back-to-back wins over ranked opponents. Syracuse was 25, who they beat Thursday, and Notre Dame was 16, who they beat on Sunday. Gotta imagine Courtney Banghart's team is going to be ranked again when the new poll comes out. First ever win for the women at Purcell Pavilion. That's great. Breakout game for India Navarre, 16 points off the bench to lead the team. Here's the thing, though. The ladies now got to go on the road again on Thursday at number 22 FSU. So, heck, let's just keep it rolling. You know what I'm saying? The sad news is that they're going to have to do that without Kayla McPherson. Kayla's been out since the South Carolina game with a knee injury, and unfortunately, it is going to be a season-ending knee injury. We know she's had her struggles with injuries, and so, man, best thoughts to Kayla as she goes through the process of recovering and getting better. She's excited to talk about looking forward to being part of the team in a different way and helping the team's success. But it's just another blow to depth as Carolina had already had early in the season. All right, it's Monday of the national championship game coming up tonight. We've got Michigan and Washington. The Wolverines are favored at FanDuel by 5.5. And look, here's the thing. I don't know how many of you out there, I think Pack is going to be upset with me because he's a Michigan guy, but I'm going with the Huskies in this one. My wife is a big Texas Longhorns fan, and Washington beat them, so I want that team to then win. I love Michael Penix, and I want to see that offense just do work against the Michigan defense. We'll obviously see what happens tonight. Hey, would love to be chatting with you in the Locked On Tar Heels Discord during the national championship game, so come hop in there. Again, the link is in the show notes. That's it for kicking off Monday. Been great to be together. Can't wait to chat again tomorrow. If you want to email us, lockedontarheels@gmail.com. Please don't forget to subscribe to the show on video and audio formats. We are so close to 7,000 subscribers on YouTube. If you haven't yet, it would mean so much if you would go and do that. Bring a friend in, have them subscribe, family, whatever it would be. You can also smash the like button to let us know you are here. If you haven't rated or reviewed the show, it would mean a lot if you would do that as well. 5 stars, it just helps the algorithm help people find the show. All right, y'all, it's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. Can't wait to talk tomorrow. But until then, peace.